that should make you feel normal.
Well, yeah. I remember as a kid, I felt like we were always running late to church. Always.
Yep.
I felt like we ran late to everything. That was just like the nature of the beast.
Best
So.
intentions gone awry.
Yeah. Whew. Well, I gotta get some coffee in me to wake up. But how's everybody doing this morning?
I'm truly blessed.
Amen to that. Well, we're going to continue on where Pastor Leah had left off. So we'll recap a little bit, and then we'll just keep plowing forward in the life of David. So now I can say that I am dragging things out this morning in the announcements, and say that, because I'm sure we'll get derailed somewhere on the line here. All right, so last week we left off talking about the fact that even prior to the tribulation, when the new temple is built, there will be animal sacrifices in the temple, and then throughout the 1,000-year millennial reign with Jesus, when Jesus will rule and reign from Jerusalem. And so when Jesus sets up the kingdom in Jerusalem during the millennial reign, of course, the temple will have been rebuilt, and I don't know if that's the third temple or a fourth temple. I'd have to go back and see it. I don't think the third one's destroyed in the tribulation. I think that is the third temple. And then the animal sacrifices are reinstituted. And I don't believe it's to, for the sins of the people, but as an object lesson to show them that, hey, sin causes death. And so, especially when the Lord will be ruling from Jerusalem and Satan's bound, there's not going to be pervasive sin like it is today. There's not going to be a dictator in a third world country, throwing people in prison and, lopping heads off, because if that were to happen, he gets immediately judged by Christ from Jerusalem, because he rules with a rod of iron. So there's not going to be this, world full of just craziness and darkness and sin nonstop. It's going to be as close to peace on earth as possible while still having sinful men be in it. Because there'll be plenty of people who are not regenerated. And the animal sacrifices will be a type to show that, hey, Christ paid the ultimate sacrifice, and it was a death that, sin is the death as a result of sin. So we left off talking about the whole burnt offering and what that was. Just to recap, it was the whole animal except the hide. So Leviticus 1 and 6, 8 through 13 describe the traditional burnt offering. The Israelites brought a bull, sheep, or goat, a male with no defect, and killed it at the entrance to the tabernacle. The animal's blood was drained, and the priest sprinkled the blood around the altar. The animal was skinned and cut into pieces, the intestines and legs washed, and the priest burned the pieces over the altar all night. The priest received the skin as a fee for his help. A turtle dove or a pigeon could also be sacrificed, although they weren't skinned. That would be if you couldn't afford, a goat or a sheep or a bull. So, remember, just for Israel, burnt offerings were made as follows. So for the offering of Israel, the priest had to perform the burnt offerings as follows. Every morning and evening, that's in Exodus 29, 38 through 42, and Numbers 28 at 2. Each Sabbath, Numbers 28, 9 through 10. The beginning of each month, Numbers 28, 11. At Passover, Numbers 28 and verse 19. With the new grain first fruits of offering at the Feast of Weeks, Numbers 28, 27. At the Feast of Trumpets, Rosh Hashanah, Numbers 29, 1. At the new moon, Numbers 29, 6. This does not count all the individual sinner offerings and all the offerings all the other offerings that had to be made. So basically, the priest was literally offering sacrifice every day of the week, multiple times a day. And it just never stopped. It literally never stopped. If you had to do it every morning and evening, and that's every day of the week, plus the Sabbath, plus all the holidays, you can see why they had to have an army of priests basically to constantly be making sacrifice. I mean, if it was just up to the high priest, the man would keel over after a week of non-stop sacrificing. Now the peace offering, a peace offering in the Old Testament law is described in Leviticus 7:11 through 21. It was a voluntary sacrifice given to God in 3 specific instances. First, a peace offering could be given as a free will offering, meaning that the worshiper was giving the peace offering as a way to say thank you for God's unsought generosity. It was basically just a way to praise God for his goodness. And that actually made me think, I wonder how many of the Israelites actually did that. Just took the time to give God a peace offering because they just were thankful. I mean, we can hardly thank the Lord on a daily basis for all the goodness he's done in us, and we don't have to bring an actual bull or a goat or a sheep, and we don't have to do any of that hard work. We can just say, Lord, I just thank you for who you are today. And how many of us don't do that on a regular basis? I mean, I am guilty of that myself. We get caught up in our lives. We get caught up in the everyday rigmarole of going to work and doing this. And the very fact that we're able to get up and breathe is because of him. And so, I mean, we need to have a better understanding of the peace offering so that we can be like, you know what? Just, Lord, thank you for who you are today. Thank you for everything that you've done in my life and given me. And I am so blessed. And that's really, that would be our modern equivalent to a peace offering. The second way a peace offering could be given was alongside a fulfilled vow. A good example of this was when Hannah fulfilled her vow to God by bringing Samuel to the temple. On that occasion, she also brought a peace offering to express the peace in her heart toward God concerning her sacrifice. It was a way to say, I have no resentment. I am holding nothing back in the payment of my vow. Lauren, are you going to give Ben over to the temple? Vow to God to give Ben to the temple. Ben, you're getting sent to the temple, my friend.
How? Oh, no.
Oh man, wardrobe malfunction. Jennifer's shoe broke. It's been a tough morning. Shannon, fix poor Jennifer's shoe. She's gonna have a breakdown. He'll put a screw in it. It's not fashionable, but it'll probably work. The third purpose of a peace offering was to give thanksgiving for God's deliverance in an hour of dire need. And we have all probably experienced that ourselves, where the Lord comes through in the last minute to help us out. And I can tell you, in work, we've had some areas where either sometimes it's been our fault, and a lot of times it's not our fault, but there's been times where we screwed the pooch pretty royally, and we needed the Lord to bail us out. And he has come through every time. And I can't tell you how many times I've been, Lord, thank you so much for delivering me from my own idiocy, more times than not. Now, the commentators tend to paint the peace offering as a propitiation offering, like bringing your wife home roses after a fight, hoping it will soothe the hurt. In this case, to appease God, but I don't see that the scriptures bear this out. The scripture in Leviticus speaks of it as a thanksgiving offering. Most sacrifices in the Old Testament system were not eaten by worshipers, but the peace offering was meant to be eaten. Only a portion of the animal or grain brought to the altar was burned. The rest was given back to the worshiper and to the poor and hungry. The beautiful picture here is of God's provision for his people, both physically and spiritually. His grace and goodness are present throughout the offerings. In the peace offering, God was providing what we need, a way to thank him for his goodness and physical substance. It's incredible following the Lord. He provides what we need. Then we give some of what he blessed us with back in offering of thanks. And what does he do? He turns around and blesses us even more. And Mom and Dad have lived this many, many times. And we have. Jennifer and I have. You literally cannot outgive God. I know that's an old cliche, but it's the truth. If you give out of a thankful heart, you make a peace offering of thanksgiving, he will always give right back. And I know in my own life, One of the ways that we give, I guess you could sort of like a peace offering though with tithing, is we give part of our income. We don't really bring an animal, but we bring part of our income and we give it back to the Lord.
That's gross income, not net income.
Well, yeah, we give gross and we give on our gross. I know some people give on the net, but that's neither here nor there. The way we do it, it's just because we don't pay taxes up front out of a W-2 check. Essentially, we pay taxes on the back end at the end of the year. But that's just how I felt led to do it. And you all might be different, but I always felt led to give on the gross. But anyway, that's not the point. The point was, we give out of a thankful heart. If you're giving out of a thankful heart, the Lord, He's going to give it right back to you in more ways than one. I remember one time, and paying tithe is always one of those areas where people can have a hard time doing it. But it's if you really trust the Lord, He'll provide for you. Teresa, you're right. He got out a nail gun. He's gonna fix that shoe up right. Shannon the cobbler. He's a jack of all trades. But I remember one time, this was years ago, before Jennifer and I were married, and I was going through the deposits and doing my end of month reports for the church, and I found a Wednesday night deposit that had never been made. I forgot to deposit it, and it was like my check was the only one in there. So I was like, oh my gosh, that never cleared the bank. And so I had a choice to make, because I had just enough money to pay my car payment, and that was pretty much it. And I was like, if I could either pay the car payment or I could pay tithe. And those were the only two options I had. And so I sat there at my desk debating what I was going to do. And so finally I said, no, you know what? Lord, this is your money. You will provide. I'm going to trust you. And so I went and made the deposit, had no money for the car payment. And it was due I think it was due the following Monday or Tuesday. And this was like a Thursday that I saw it. Well, the very next day, one of the guys that used to go here called me up and said, hey, you want to work this weekend? And I was like, yes. So I ended up making, and he paid me like way more than I probably really needed. He gave me like $600, which was almost, that was over twice what the car payment was. So not only did it pay the car payment, but it also put money in my pocket until, to survive the rest of the, month until I got paid again. And Mom and Dad have got so many stories like that of where, they had to choose between doing the one or the other. And the fact of the matter is, if you really just trust God with everything in your life, He'll provide, He'll bless. God is not interested in taking from us. That is not His heart at all. But the lie we so often believe is that our good actions bring about His goodness, and our sinful action must be paid for in personal sacrifice. That is the lie Satan tells us all. I lived that way most of my life, and I know and so many of us have. I thought the onus was on me, and it wasn't. My job is simply to accept the sacrifice that He provided. And what's crazy is that, we know from Scripture that Jesus said, ye being evil know how to give gifts to your children. How much more our Heavenly Father? It's like, you don't give your kid a dangerous, poisonous, venomous snake to play with because you love your kid. I mean, that's even most ungodly parents won't go that far. It's a true, you've sunk really low if you're a parent who will actually harm their own child. And it's just amazing that we don't consider God to be like our heaven. I mean, He really is like a good, gracious Father that wants nothing but the best for you. And somehow we think that He's just up there like Zeus with a lightning bolt, ready to smite us anytime we mess up. We're not like that with our own kids, or at least we shouldn't be. We want nothing but the best for our kids. And we want to give our kids what we couldn't give, maybe what we couldn't get when we were children. We want to do more for them and make sure they have everything they have need of. So God is no different. God is better than us. So of course He wants to bless us. It's His heart to bless us. The peace offering shows that worshipers in the Old Testament were not any more responsible for their salvation than worshipers in the New Testament. Throughout the ages, people have been tempted to think that sacrifices create God's favor. This belief is evident in our modern understanding of a peace offering as a propitiation for wrongdoing, like bringing God roses after sinning and asking that He forgive us. We have the total wrong idea of it at all. Only Christ's sacrifice creates favor with God and covers wrongdoing. In the Old Testament sacrifices were a picture of the future provision. I really don't think anyone can fully appreciate what Jesus did without this Old Testament example of the animal sacrifice, and I believe that is why the sacrifices will continue throughout the millennial reign to demonstrate what Jesus did for us. And if you look at every other religion in the world, you don't even have to think of a name, just know that every other religion in the world is about man earning his way to heaven or nirvana or whatever. And so it's all predicated on what you have to do. You must do this, you must do that, you must do this in order to achieve heaven or nirvana or whatever. And I've seen it in on TV. I was watching this goofy show, or this, it was called An Idiot Abroad, and it's actually very funny. I don't know if you've seen it or not. It was a friend of Ricky Gervais, the actor. You know who Ricky Gervais is? He's an actor and comedian. And anyway, he had a friend who was just an absolute miserable, curmudgeon-y guy. And so Ricky and his other buddy thought it would be hilarious to make a show of sending this guy out into the world to go experience the world. So they sent him to India, and of course he complained the whole time. But they made him go see all these monks. And I'll never forget this one guy. He held his hand up over his head as a way of, showing his religious fervor. And, he was a Hindu monk. For like 30 years, he just held it up over his head to the point where it actually locked in place. And like he can't even pull it down now. And it was all shriveled because it wasn't used. So like it was literally like that big around. It was just bone basically frozen in place over his head. And I was like, but that's what Satan tells all of us to do. Is we're convinced that we got to do all these stupid things in order for God to earn favor with God. When the truth is matter, we cannot earn God's favor in our own strength. That's why Paul said that all our righteousness is as filthy rags. There's no way that we can ever earn God's favor, and that's why in the Old Testament the sacrifices were there, because the law was given to prove that you couldn't keep it, and you needed to have a sacrifice in order for you to get right with the Lord. And so I remember talking to a friend of mine who was Jewish, and we were talking about, the Old Testament, the law and all that. And he was going on about, well, if you do this and this, and I was like, well, okay. And I was like, so you think you can keep the law? What were the sacrifices for? I was like, why did you have to have a sacrifice if you could keep the law? And he goes, well, I don't know. And I was like, exactly, because you can't. You cannot keep the law in your own strength, and that's why you had to have all those animal sacrifices, and that's why they never stopped, because there was always a need for sacrifice. The right sacrifice. And only Jesus' perfect sacrifice on the cross could fully atone for what man caused by sinning. All right. So back to David, as we finish up those verses in 2 Samuel chapter 6, we get to where at the end, after David offered the burnt offering, he blessed the people. And as king, it's a picture of Christ. David stood in a position spiritually of priest and a type of savior and blessed the people. It is believed by some that he offered the people a piece of meat which would have been allowed under the peace offering, and a cup of wine, closely reminiscent of the Last Supper. This was done when the sacrificing was over, and whether it was after the first 6 steps and then when it arrived at the tent, or whether it was every 6 paces, we do not know, but the sacrifice was made at the end, and then the blessing. So I thought that was kind of neat how David actually distributed meat and wine to all the people of Israel. It says to all the whole host of Israel. So however many people that was, there was a lot of planning that went into this whole, the whole deal of moving the ark from Obed-Edom's house to Jerusalem. And I mean, you think about the planning it would take to feed, gosh, if there was at least 1 million people, and now he was not king over all of Israel at this point still. I think Ishbosheth was still ruling in Israel, in the northern part, because the kingdom was still divided, and ultimately David would rule over the United Kingdom. But still, if there was, even if there were just 100,000 people, can you imagine trying to feed 100,000 people? I mean, that takes a lot of planning and effort to go into it, and that was the king just giving out of the king's stores, essentially. All right. We don't want to miss this fact that the blessing comes after the sacrifice for sin. Without the sacrifice, there is no blessing and can be no blessing. Just think of the millions of blood sacrifices that were offered every day in Israel, all pointing to the cross that was to come. But his sacrifice would be for all people one time, as Paul said in Hebrews 13:20, the everlasting covenant. So, there can't be any blessing until sacrifice has been made. But thankfully for us, the sacrifice doesn't have to be made on a daily basis. It was already made once, 2,000 years ago on the cross. And what we have to do every day is just remember that that's where it was all done. That's where the work was finished. And that we don't have to do anything anymore. We just rest in the finished work that Jesus did. So, 2 Samuel 6:19. Then he distributed among all the people, among the whole multitude of Israel, both the women and the men, to everyone a loaf of bread, a piece of meat, and a cake of raisins, so that all the people departed, everyone to his house. So right there, he gave all that food to everybody. That had to take a monumental effort. You cannot follow the Lord and not be blessed. It's an impossibility. I'm not talking about money and things necessarily. You may live in a country that's not possible. But whatever your circumstance, you will rise above it. And that's true. I mean, let's say we lived in a little village on the coast of Somalia or whatever, and we're fishers. We're fishermen and women. If we're Christians, the Lord's going to bless our catches every day if we put our faith in him to help bless our catch so we don't have to turn to piracy. Although, Lauren, I think you might have fun being a pirate. Just a bit. Just a bit. Now the real question is, would you want to have an eye patch or a parrot?
I'm handicapped with 2 eyes.
So you'll take the parrot. What would be your pirate name? I don't know either. Tim could be Redbeard, because he's got red beard. Captain Redbeard. No, but we can trust the Lord no matter what our circumstances are. And I know that Christians all over the world, God's always blessing them. And we know that for a fact, because what does the Bible say? Where David, and I don't even know if we've quoted this yet, this might be further on. Well, that might be in a psalm, but he says, I once was young and now I'm old, and I've never seen the righteous forsaken nor begging bread. So that means we probably won't all be Elon Musk, but we certainly won't be destitute and starving to death if the Lord is our true, if we have our faith in the Lord nonstop. All right, verse 20. Then David returned to bless his household. And Michal, the daughter of Saul, came out to meet David and said, "How glorious was the king of Israel today, uncovering himself today in the eyes of the maids of his servants, as one of the base fellows shamelessly uncovers himself." So she didn't exactly greet him with, "Hey, David, good job out there, bud." You can hear the contempt in her voice just reading it. But before we get on to Michal, there was one thing I wanted to point out that I thought was really interesting that I picked up from reading Matthew Henry's commentary. And that is, so first, David went and he blessed all the people in the nation. And then David returned to bless his household. So he didn't forget his duties as a father, as a husband to his household, to go and do the work and bless his household the same way. And that's really important. I remember when Dad was getting into the ministry, I think it was Brother Gann told him that his first and foremost ministry was his family, and that if he wanted to be successful in the pulpit, he better be successful at home. And that was, make time for your family, don't forget about them, don't put the church above your family. And that's true for all of us, no matter if we're in the pulpit or not. If our first ministry is our family, then that's our duty. Especially as husbands and fathers, we need to be ministering to our households first, and then everybody else, after that. Because, I know, like Dad said, if he were to, be this world-changing pastor and saw millions saved, but James and I both went to hell, how successful of a ministry is that, really? I mean, if you can't win your own family, that's where it should start. Because if we just won our kids, every generation won their kids, then what would happen just a few generations? I mean, that's where the real ministry needs to start. I see a strap that's fixed. The old nail gun came through. Tebow.
We'll see the hole.
He's just going to be down here cobbling now from now on.
If it doesn't,
I'm going barefoot.
I would change.
She can go barefoot. That's one thing about you ladies. Y'all can go barefoot and it really not be a problem. I would hate going barefoot. I despise it.
There's a passion over this barefoot.
Yes, but that's all weird and for
It
show.
is weird, I'm just saying. That's
Yeah.
why I said it.
And if Dad were to go barefoot, we'd all have to leave because his feet are so ugly.
Keep going.
No offense, Dad, but you know it's true. We love you anyway. He used to do this thing where he would make his foot like it was alive and like it was a monster, and he would chase us around the house with his foot, and he'd be over there like, oh, I can't control it. Like it was like this. And it brought Mom to tears. And he was like, why are you crying over a foot? It's like pitiful. But yes, our household should be the first field of ministry. All right, so on to Michal. So Michal, the daughter of Saul, you can just see how just contemptuous she was. I mean, she just came out and lambasted him. And that's the other thing that Matthew Henry pointed out, is she didn't wait to talk to him in private. She met him on his way in and was like, hey, you're acting a fool and I don't like it. So, what are your family and friends saying about you? David didn't care, and neither should you. When you start caring, you're on dangerous ground. This is the work of Satan in her heart. Guard yourself against listening to the lies of Satan, which comes through others. Notice that Michal didn't wait on David to come to her. She rushed out to meet him, evidently in a fit of rage. The scripture says she despised him in her heart, which was in 2 Samuel 6:16. That was because she saw him from the window of David's house and saw him dancing, and then she despised him in her heart. The love that she once had for David had left. There was just too much water under the dam. All these stories are here for us to learn from, and this is one that we need to learn from especially. So what could she be thinking? Well, she talks of David as king, so evidently she doesn't approve of his behavior as a king. She, I'm sure, is going by how her father carried himself. Saul certainly would have never had danced before the Lord. Saul barely gave the Lord a thought ever. This act of humility by David before the Lord is beneath her. She thinks it's not dignified. She doesn't understand the heart of David as for the Lord because her heart is hard and doesn't know the Lord. She can never understand the things of the Spirit like this, and neither can your family or friends if they are not born again. She wanted him to be a man-pleaser, and it won't take long after you get saved to realize as a Christian that it's impossible. The two, being a man-pleaser and a God-pleaser, do not mesh together at all. I remember feeling funny talking to people about the Lord. You may feel strange or intimidated, but David was king, and it didn't bother him a bit. David knew God, and David knew that there is no way he would be a king apart from God. When you think about it, the entire world was heathen worshipers and didn't know God. Only Israel did. And that's true. One of the other things that I thought was interesting that Matthew Henry pointed out was sometimes we might see something that we're like, gosh, is that person like legitimately worshiping the Lord or just carrying on? And he said in his commentary that it would be wise for us not to just immediately judge somebody if we don't necessarily agree with how they're worshiping, assuming it's biblical and not, or assuming it's not unbiblical. Like there's no outright thing you can point to and be like, that's totally unscriptural. But let's just say they were, dancing and carrying on and acting a fool from our perspective. But if their heart is in the right place and they're truly worshiping the Lord from their heart, then it wouldn't be right for us to criticize. And so, like Matthew Henry's saying, just because we don't necessarily like the way it appears, assuming it is biblical or not unbiblical, then we really shouldn't we shouldn't judge or shouldn't just jump off to conclusions, but just trust the Lord to handle the matter if it's not genuine worship. And I mean, now believe me, I have seen plenty of genuine worship in my years, and I have seen plenty of non-genuine worship in my years. And I remember, I don't know if y'all have heard of being slain in the spirit, people falling out and whatnot. Dad always said, if it's real, I'm not going to catch you because it better be real. And I have seen the real and I've seen the fake. Because I remember this one lady, she just fell out while we were worshiping, and she was pregnant. She was like 9 months pregnant. And it was at Bruce Weeks' church in Ackworth that he had, his little mission church there. And it was a storefront, an old storefront, and with a concrete floor. And she just went just right back on her back. Dad was going to try and catch her because she was pregnant. But she just hit the ground, and nothing. She was just like she might as well have landed on a feather mattress. Nothing wrong with her. And she just smacked the concrete. And you heard it. But nothing happened to her. She was fine because it was the Lord. Then, when we were at Riverside, there was a lady who she, I guess, wanted to make a show of things. And so she acted like she went out. And she knocked over one of the elder ladies and broke her hip. And then you know that was not the Lord, because the Lord's not going to break some old lady's hip. It's not going to happen. But the flesh acting out and acting a fool will. So I've seen the real and I've seen the fake, and that's why it's important for us not necessarily to jump to conclusions, but also to test everything according to if it's biblical, or there's no one thing that you can say points to something that's unbiblical. Then I would defer to let the Lord handle it. And if somebody wants to fall out, you just say, I'm not going to catch you, because if it's the Lord, you'll be all right. And if it's not, you'll regret making an issue. You'll regret making a scene. All right. Now, what if you are the only one in your family that knows God? Is that going to stop you? I sure hope not. You must make up your mind now to go on with God, no matter if you're the only one on the face of the earth that is going to heaven. That's how important it really is. And yes, family may not want to be around you, your friends may dump you, but walking with God every day cannot compare. Because, when you really if we were to just really stop and think about eternity just every once in a while, that would really, it should really motivate us to not only just be thankful that God made a way of escape, but also to realize that, our friends and family who aren't saved, they are headed towards a very, very bad end. And I don't care how miserable of a person you can think of, eternity in the lake of fire is a horrible, scary conclusion to a life, and we should want nobody to go there. God doesn't want anybody to go there. Even our worst enemies, He doesn't want to go there. God didn't intend for Osama bin Laden to go to hell. And and if we really have the heart of God, we should want to try and be winning our family, even if, those that aren't saved, because we don't want them to end up in hell. All right, let's look at verse 21. So David said to Michal, "It was before the Lord who chose me instead of your father and all his house to appoint me ruler over the people of the Lord, over Israel. Therefore, I will play music before the Lord." So speaking truth to your family, you've got to just stand on the word and speak the truth. I know how it is, and I know that it is hard dealing with unsaved family, but you need to pray and ask God to give you the boldness to speak through you. You must plant seeds. Don't let them die and go to hell because you were ashamed to speak truth to them. And don't die without Jesus and go to hell with them, just to maintain relationships here. Because I can tell you right now, there's not a single person on this planet who's worth me going to hell over. Even my precious little baby girl. I don't intend to go to hell over her. Because, that's just not in the cards. And David stood up to her, and notice how he pointed out to her that the Lord had chosen him. He knows the truth of the matter. He knows that God is real, and God had called him from nothing to be king. He will not let any unbeliever persuade him from the truth that he knows so very deeply in his heart. He basically tells her to go pound sand at the end. No matter what you think, I'm going to play music before my Lord. Another thing that we need to consider is that a lot of years have passed, and there has been a lot of water under the dam, meaning a lot has happened to them both, and they aren't those young, innocent lovers anymore. They are hardened by life adults. Saul had torn them apart and given her to another man. David had to flee and run and kill to stay alive, all the while knowing the one he loved was in the arms of another man. Their lives were painful. Whether it was God's will for them to be together again is debatable. I tend to think it was not God's will, because the Bible makes it clear that her new husband loved her and was torn up when she was taken back to David. And the scripture twice after that called her not David's wife, but the daughter of Saul, Saul's daughter. Coupled with the fact that it's not working out very good also tells me this was not God's will. I think over the years, Michal had gotten bitter. I think a root of, or spirit of bitterness had taken hold. Hebrews 12:15 tells us to guard against the root of bitterness, because it will it will defile the whole body. It rots away the inside of a person. It spoils everything they think and everything they do until they cannot enjoy anything in life. Who knows somebody who is just the most... Have you ever met a really bitter individual? They're miserable, and they complain about everything. They literally can't enjoy a single thing in life. And it literally is poison that rots your bones. And I think of one individual, I'm not going to say their name, but they, complain to this day about somebody who's dead and gone for years now. And it's like, that person is gone, and yet you still hate them. That's pathetic. It's like, it's just pitiful. It just taints everything in your life when you let bitterness in. I know, and it can get in there sneaky, especially when it was against somebody who really did you wrong or hurt you. It can be easy to get hold of it, for the devil to kick that little door open and be like, hey, let's mull on what that person did to you. They said that thing to you. He said that or she said that, and that really grated you, didn't it? Like, you should tell them what you really think. I've had to fight bitterness in my own life for certain people. One individual comes to mind again, and he's not a bad person. He's just kind of arrogant, and he will tell you what he thinks even when he's wrong. So it's like, okay, but you just have to pray against it. I had to give it over to the Lord, because I was like, I'm a lot bigger than this individual, and I thought, you know what, I could just pound you to smithereens, and maybe that's what you deserve, is just to get a good butt whooping, and see if those comments still you still want to say those comments after I've knocked all your teeth out. And then I had to pray through and say, Lord, that's a bad spirit. And I started getting into that spirit every time I thought of that individual. And I had to sit seriously. I was like, you know what? This is getting to be a problem. I got to give this over to the Lord. Now I can see that person that doesn't bother me anymore. Thank the Lord, because it's only the Lord that did it. But it'll destroy everything. So John 5:44 says, 44 says, how can ye believe which receive honor one of another, and seek not the honor that cometh from God only? The truth is, we all want love and honor. We all want love and honor and respect. We want people to like us and think well of us, but really you shouldn't care so much about that as you should care what God thinks of you. Isn't that what that verse says in John? We need to start caring more about what the Lord thinks than what our family and friends think. You must have a made-up mind. Like Jeff told me many years ago, I'm not going to hell for you or the boys. See, I'm just practicing what my father did. He wanted us to go with him, but he was not staying out of heaven if we decided not to go. And you know, I remember growing up, and Dad would actually say that to us when we got older. You know, when we were young teenagers and stuff, because he would be like, he's like, I'm not going to hell for you. He's like, if you want to go, you're not taking me with you. And, you know, looking back, his example really made a huge impact, because there were times where, I mean, Dad just put up with a lot of garbage from all directions, and he never gave up on the Lord. He persevered, and he constantly moved forward with the Lord. And so, Dad, if you're watching, that's why you're my hero. I heard that, Lauren. You know what? That's a demerit.
Keep them going.
You've got to, I don't know, I was going to say do something like wash dishes or something, but we don't have any dishes to wash. You got to make me another cup of coffee. That's your,
You sure? I make high octane.
well, there's coffee there. Just put some cream and a packet of stevia in there. A spacket.
I spack it.
There you go. That's for making the sassafras comment. Thank you. Now you get a gold star. I'll erase the demerit.
0 sugar, hazelnut, half a nut.
Hazelnut, a little bit of half and half, because I'm not a big fan of that Cloverfield hazelnut from Dollar General. It's not that good.
Yeah.
But yeah, Jason's like, yeah, it's got a weird taste to it. So just enough to give it a little flavor, and then the half and half to make it creamy. All right. So, so what if your family thinks you're weird, or your friends think you're weird? Who do you think that, yeah, James doesn't care. Who do you think they are going to call when all hell has broken loose in their own lives, and they're at the end of themselves? It won't be their drinking buddy. That's just like them. No, they'll seek you out, the one they think God might hear. And James, I know you have a lot of crazy friends. But I was trying to think, there was one instance where something similar like that happened to you. Wasn't there a friend who was always kind of like, he never really thought anything about the Lord, and then all of a sudden something went wrong in his life and he called you? I feel like there was something like that. I know for Dad, his prime example is that guy he worked with, and was always calling him like Jesus and calling him a holy roller.
At different job sites and stuff.
But and then that one day, Dad ended up in the truck with him as they were going to lunch, and the guy just started breaking down and crying, and he asked Dad to pray for his cat, and Dad almost laughed, but the Holy Spirit stopped him, and it was because that cat was his. His ex-wife who left him. It was the cat that he bought her when they got married or something like that, or when they got engaged. So that's the prime example for Dad. I'm trying to think if I've had an example like that. I don't tend to have as many friends as James and Dad, because I don't talk to everybody. And most of the time I don't care to hear about people's problems. So that's another problem. That's another issue where I don't have the pastor's heart. So I don't get those experiences. But I was trying to think there was somebody that did that with you, James.
I've had so many.
I know you've had so many. I just can't remember.
I mean, I have one friend who was raised Catholic that he always calls me or texts me about what's going on. Okay. You know, he doesn't call everybody else, and he knows I'm a believer, and he always talks to me, which
Yeah.
is fine, you know, because I have I have a biblical paradigm, biblical worldview.
Yeah.
So, you know, and I tell him that.
I was almost thinking it was somebody you worked with at one point, but I can't remember.
I can't remember. It seems like I've had stuff like that happen so many times.
Yeah, it's too hard to remember.
Anymore.
But the point is, yeah, those people, they might make fun of you one day, but when their world comes crashing down, they're going to turn to you because you're the only one that has an answer at all. Everybody else will give them nonsense. Or, you know, if you don't have the Lord, what other wisdom can you get than what the world already has? I mean,
Yeah.
if you're lost and you go to another lost person, they're going to think the same way. They're not going to have any answers for you. So you're going to go somewhere to somebody that might have an answer. All right, let's look at verse 22 now. David says to her, "And I will be even more undignified than this, and will be humble in my own sight. But as for the maidservants of whom you have spoken, by them I will be held in honor."
I remember who it was.
Who?
It was, I could say his name, it's been 25 years ago. That was Jacob Bridgeville, my old manager.
Yeah. What happened?
He was going to take me home from work because, you know, we ended up, it was slam back Friday night. We didn't get down to like almost 3 o'clock in the morning. By the time we got everything cleaned up, and Dad wasn't on the road, so I had already texted Mom at like 10:30, said it's going to be late, so I'll have one of the guys just take me to the house. Something was going on with him and his wife, and I was, 15?
Probably. If
Something
you
like that.
or 16, because you didn't start driving until 17, so you had to be
15 or 16.
15 or 16. Yeah.
So anyway, I just ended up sharing the gospel with him in the parking lot and prayed with him. And this guy back then was probably 25, 10 years older than me.
Yeah. And he kind of made fun of you about being a Christian to begin with, right?
And he was a lot different after that.
Yeah. And you know, who knows?
I thought about him over the years.
He may not have gotten saved right then, but he might have. It was obviously a seed planted.
Yeah.
So David really doesn't care what she thinks. God is David's #1 priority. Can you say that? What is your #1 priority every day? If you make it God, then everything in your life will pan out. Effortlessly, I might add. Oh, if I had only known this so many years ago. I was thinking recently what a waste marriage counseling is. If you will just go after God with all your might, the marriage will fall into place. Everything falls into place when you go after God with all your heart, soul, mind, and spirit. If you're a God hater, they divorce you, and you. Oh, if your spouse is a God hater, they divorce you. You go on with your happy self. One thing to really think about is if we truly were to sell out to God in every aspect of our lives, then the stuff that needs to be addressed for us in our own lives, God will bring it to our attention. And He'll bring it up and be like, you know what, you don't need to be doing such and such. And you'll be like, oh yeah, Lord, you're right. I don't need to be doing that. And He'll give you the strength to put it down, whatever, or stop doing whatever it is. And it doesn't have to be overtly sinful. It could just be not paying enough attention to, your wife or something like that, or your husband, or if you're bow hunting too much. If you're bow hunting too much in the fall and you're, leaving your wife and children behind, the Lord might say, just going to throw out a name there, James, that maybe you need to cut back on the bow hunting and spend more time with your family. You'll be like, if you're following the Lord, you'll be like, yes, you're right. And then the Lord will bless the times that you do go bow hunting. Because the Lord is for you and not against you. No, I just thought of it.
Just bow hunt the right wind patterns. You won't go every day anyway.
That's not the point, James. The point is to follow the Lord, not the wind patterns. Because the Lord can change the wind for you.
James bows hunts and gets a gold star, and I make a comment, and I get married.
Oh, no, that's because you were being sassy.
Oh, okay.
And just for making that comment, that's another demerit. James, demerits don't work on James anyway.
Oh.
Don't you remember that story I've told multiple
Yes.
times?
Yes.
I will never forget that.
Just threw them away.
Miss Posey, she just gave up. She was like, she just tore them all up. She's like, these don't even work anyway.
Yeah, she just went on teaching.
And what's funny is then it like all calmed down and you were like, good. And then she just went on teaching and it was like nothing ever happened. It was like the strangest event.
I tried to get kicked out of that school.
I know. James had his outburst and then was done, and she was like, all right, let's get back to class. And James was like, okay. It's like, that was a wild, wild scene. That was so funny. All right. David is saying just that. I will go after God with all that is in me, and what you think will bring me shame will actually bring me honor. And that's true. So then verse 23, therefore Michal, the daughter of Saul, had no children to the day of her death. So clearly, it didn't work out for her in that sense, because children back in that time were really a woman's retirement, so to speak, because if she had no children, there was nobody to take care of her. I mean, and even today, in today's society, it's still very much like that. I mean, if you don't have any children, you're gonna end up being taken care of, but it won't be by anybody who really loves you. You'd be wasting away at a nursing home or something like that. But yeah, that was not a good end for her. So, do you think that this was in there by accident? Just a minute, inconsequential detail. Some believe this was the end of her relationship with David. Her bitter heart destroyed any love that possibly had been there. But I think what was the nail in the coffin was she lost respect for him in that day. And that is the number one thing men must have from their wife is respect. A marriage will not last without respect. A man needs respect as much as he needs relations. I like that she used the word relations, the old school way of saying it. But that's 100% true. You want to see a marriage fall apart, if the wife, if she has no respect for her husband, it will be just, they may not necessarily get divorced right away, but it'll be a miserable marriage for everybody involved. And I have seen that, where a wife has no respect for her husband. I remember one of Dad's great moving stories was he moved this lady and she was just a total battle axe. And she was, I can't remember what she was carrying on about, and I'm sure he's told you the story, but that was the one where he started calling her a battle axe while he was in the house. He'd go to his helper, hey, give me that box battle axe, and then just start saying it and just say that she was in the house and just really digging her. And then he said she would come and she would, because they had to shuttle all the furniture because he couldn't get his truck to the house, so he'd load it on a smaller truck, bring it to the main trailer, load it there. And so when she would come, she'd stand it and put her hands on her hips and just glare at him. And that's when he was singing Mr. Rogers' It's a Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood. And he would say, it's a beautiful day in the neighborhood. And he would look at her. He's like, won't you be my neighbor? And he would smile at her and just, she could fry an egg on her face because she was so mad. The heat coming off of it. And so he told his helper that would go all over the road with him, he's like, you watch, when we get to the destination, her husband's there, he's going to be the most puny little sorry sack of a husband you've ever seen. And sure enough, he was like so timid and just like had to apologize for his wife. Was telling Dad, I'm so sorry, she just gets in these moods or whatever, And he was like, you pitiful excuse. And that's probably because, he's beaten down because she's got no respect for him. And that's why I'm going to bring back the rule of thumb for you ladies. You can beat your husband or your wife with a rod that's no wider than your thumb.
You can do that on your anniversary.
I know. I think we should bring it back. No? You don't think so? The ladies disagree? Gotta keep y'all in your place. Yeah,
I think you're outnumbered 4-1.
I am. Y'all use that against me? Y'all get rods that are no wider than y'all's thumbs? Who's got the biggest thumb?
I was gonna say, who's got the biggest?
Yeah, who's got the biggest thumb? Y'all use that one as the rule to beat me with the rods? Oh, man. No, but respect is, you have to have respect for each other, honestly, in marriage. Because if a husband doesn't respect his wife, it's going to be miserable. And if the wife doesn't respect the husband, it's going to be miserable. All right. Now, the Bible says in 2 Samuel 21:8, which we haven't got to yet, that Michal had 5 sons, but these were not her own. In Hebrew, whether natural sons or adopted sons, it's never specified, meaning the Hebrew language doesn't distinguish between an adopted son or a natural son, which is really cool because we are adopted by God and grafted into the vine in Jesus, like we have been there all along. He doesn't treat us as second best. The verse says that Michal brought up the sons of Adriel. Adriel was her brother-in-law, and that's in 1 Samuel 18:19. The mother must have died, so these were her nephews. So this was the end of David and Michal's relationship, I believe. They probably didn't divorce, but he most likely was never, not ever with her again. And I would say that's probably true. Because David had other wives that he probably, that did respect him. Not that you should have multiple wives. We went over that, didn't we, Lauren?
We did.
Talked about, that was a few months back, got into polygamy from David's life. He shouldn't have got into polygamy. All right. So that's the end of chapter 6. It's already, what time is it?
10:57. You have 3 minutes.
10:57? Well, let's stop there. That way we don't have to start a new chapter. But has anybody got anything they want to add? Comments? Questions?
I said, I'm so thankful my mother did not name me Edward.
What was it?
I said, I'm so thankful my mother did not name me Edward.
Egla? You don't want to be an Egla?
No.
Egla McCreary. Yeah, that didn't have quite the same ring.
But it does.
One thing I would say about David and Michal is, what do you think would have happened if Michal had really, sold herself out to the Lord? Like, I'm going to follow the Lord like my husband. What do you think their relationship would have been like? I think it would have been restored, because if there's one thing that the Lord can do better than any counselor is restore what's been broken. So yes, even though they had been, kind of jaded by life and they'd had true hard times, if she had taken the stance that David did, which is, I'm going to thank the Lord for all that he has done, despite the hard times, who knows what would have happened. Maybe it would have been her son that would have built the temple instead of Solomon. We don't know, because obviously she chose poorly. But we need to keep that in mind, that if it's never going to be the wrong path if we choose to, follow the Lord wholeheartedly. Isn't that right, baby girl? Say, Izzy says yes. All right. Well, that's it for this morning. Hopefully, I did Pastor Leah some justice in keeping on with her. But if there's nothing else, we'll just go ahead and